Hello, universe. So I'm responding to a viewer who asked me about feeling lack of motivation to study math. How do you motivate yourself to study when you want to learn math, but it's just, it's a lot of tedious work, and there are, instant forms of gratification such as video games. We all have certain hobbies that we really enjoy that compete for our time. And I'll post the question in the video. So my response to this question is, first of all, it's a great question, and it's the right type of question you need to be asking yourself. Don't beat yourself up, okay? Shame is something that hinders progress. So what you need to do is sit down and think about ways that you can make progress in your schedule. Maybe you don't need to give up video games entirely. Maybe you need to manage your time and start studying math in the mornings and then give yourself some time to play video games at night. So one thing that I like to do is when I wake up, I have a morning routine where I go and I either get a coffee or an energy drink, but it's mostly coffee nowadays. I'm trying to move away from the energy drinks. But I go and get a coffee, and then I leave and I literally go to the library or wherever I'm studying for the day. And I do it first thing. It's the first thing that I do, right? And so there isn't time for me to be distracted by anything else. I'm not at my house. I'm not studying in my house. I'm studying in a library, right? If I study at my house, it's because I want to study for extra amount of time out of self-interest, right? Then I'm studying for leisure. But there's studying for work, like a set block of time where I force myself to study no matter what. And then there's studying for leisure and enjoyment, okay? To force yourself to study, you need to put yourself in an environment that is outside of your house, outside of any place where you have access to video games, and for a set period of time. It should be early in the day. It shouldn't be you're first playing video games and then you're trying to force yourself to go to the library and study. My recommendation is you do not play video games at the start of the day, and you go to the library first thing, or to the coffee shop, or whatever kind of place you enjoy studying that's not in your house and not in a place where you have access to video games. And you do that first thing in the day. And then you accomplish the studying that you need to accomplish, whether that's 2 hours, whether that's 4 hours, depending on your bandwidth. Some people, when you're just getting started, it's like going to the gym. When you're just getting started, or if you're just getting back into it, you're not going to be able to study for 8 hours a day. You're going to have to study maybe 2 hours. 2 really good hours of studying a day is great. You're going to make great progress if you can get in 2 productive hours of studying a day. But those productive hours need to be at the start of your day when your mind is fresh, when you haven't been distracted by these other things. But don't beat yourself up, Math takes a long time to learn. It's a slow process. It's a lot like going to the gym, or, there's a lot of differences between math and going to the gym, but there are a lot of similarities in that it's difficult to do at first, and it takes time to get used to it. It takes time to get good enough where you really enjoy it. And it just takes repeated and consistent and daily effort. And at first, it's going to be difficult. At first, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. You're not going to want to go to the library. You have to force yourself to do it for about a few months. If you force yourself to do that, get into that habit for about a few months, then the wires in your mind, these neurons will become, the neural connections will become more solidified, and you'll have a habit built, and then you'll enjoy doing it. Then you'll expect doing it, and you'll enjoy it. And you can still make time for video games, You don't need to completely give up video games. If it's a severe addiction, though, you need to maybe take a break for a couple weeks just to refresh your mind, and then you can start playing video games again. But you need to focus on trying to have a healthier relationship with video games, whatever your hobby is. Maybe for me, right now I play poker. I've been playing a lot of poker. It's maybe getting to become a distraction, right? I've been playing a lot with my friends. It's really social. It's a ton of fun. The limitations that I'm setting for myself are, okay, this is getting to be a bit out of hand. I'm playing poker a bit too much. Let me just restrict myself to Fridays and Sundays. Like Fridays and Sundays, I'm going to play poker. And that way I know I'm going to have a time when I can play it. But outside of that, I can't be playing it all these other days of the week because, it becomes distracting. And it's also a mental thing too. Like, you don't want to fall too deeply in love with your hobby. I mean, that sounds bad to say, but in reality, your brain needs time to process math subconsciously. And if you're constantly distracted by these other desires, then your brain subconsciously is going to be focused on those other desires. And it's not going to be taking that time to solidify the mathematical knowledge, right? To reflect and solidify mathematical knowledge. So I would say that, it seems like you deep down know and deep down recognize like the beauty and the importance of math. And maybe part of you prioritizes math in the long term over video games. Certainly in the short term, video games might produce more dopamine and be more satisfactory to you than mathematics. But over the long term, mathematics is going to produce a deep form of joy and contentment and a deep satisfaction in life that you're never going to achieve through video games. So in the long term, hopefully you prioritize something like math. And I don't want to hate on video games, but it's just my personal opinion that, it seems like a hobby like video games, maybe that could be your life passion and your life goal, in which case you should focus on video games above math. But if math is your life passion, your life goal, you're going to get deeper satisfaction over the long term if you stick with math and make it your priority. And so you need to build almost like a love relationship with math. It's almost like fighting love versus lust, right? Like lust is like a short-term satisfaction and a short-term pleasure and enjoyment. But if you want to build long-term success and long-term relationship with mathematics, you have to put mathematics before these addictions or these other shorter-term sources of satisfaction. And you need to put it before these other hobbies consistently for years. And then you can build a relationship that lasts a lifetime, right? And that's not to say that you need to abandon video games entirely. It's not at all to say that. Maybe you should take a break, though, and take some time to refresh your mind and kind of reset your priorities, okay? Now, the last thing that I do want to say is sorry, one second. Oh, yes. So the last thing I wanted to say is that you need to find ways to make math more interesting to you short term, okay? So you need to find ways to make math more of a creative process, because math is truly a creative process. It's a form of art, okay? The proofs that you write, the mathematical techniques that you're learning, especially at the higher level, are very artistic. They're very beautiful. And there's a lot of creative freedom involved, right, in your proofwriting. How you think about a proof, how you approach a proof, the geometric intuition that you use. The greatest example would be in differential geometry, or the example that comes to mind, right? In differential geometry, you have a freedom to choose your coordinate system. And so choosing your coordinate system creates a different geometric perspective, a different intuition, a different feel of the problem. And in physics and general relativity, choosing the right coordinate system is an art that one must perfect, or at least master, in order to become good at general relativity. And I'm not saying that I have mastered it, I'm just saying that it's a fact that in general relativity, choosing the correct coordinate system is one of the most essential pieces of the science, and there's so much creative freedom involved. Of course, there must be some symmetry. You have to obey some symmetries, and your coordinate system must respect certain symmetries in order to be useful. That's an obvious fact. However, understanding which symmetries you want to obey and which symmetries you want your coordinate system should satisfy gives you a lot of freedom and flexibility because certain symmetries provide different perspectives on the same problem, okay? And so where I'm going with this example is that there's a ton of art and creative freedom involved in math. You need to find ways, creative new ways, to make math more interesting to you, that stimulate your learning process. Math is not just a memorization. You're not just meant to sit through a textbook like an encyclopedia and just memorize definition after definition, proof after proof, without having the geometric intuition, without having that interaction, that communication with the heart of math, the ocean of math, right? It's not just the symbols on the page. It's not just the definitions on the page. There's something deeper. There's life in these numbers. There's life in mathematics that you can experience and interact with, right? By thinking about these theorems, thinking about the geometric intuition behind the theorems and the definitions that you learn. And, there's different ways to approach this, but make math fun for yourself. Make math enjoyable. So many people hate math and they hate the pursuit of, the pinnacle of human knowledge because that's obviously if they phrased it that way, they wouldn't hate it, but they don't like math because they view it as algorithmic and they view it as a series of memorizations of steps. And nobody wants to memorize a dictionary. Nobody wants to memorize, maybe some people do, but few people want to memorize an encyclopedia. And they don't view that as a useful form of knowledge. They don't view it as a useful, insightful way to spend their time, and so they hate math for that reason. But math is not about memorization. Math is not about following an algorithm, right? There is a lot of creative flexibility in math, especially at the higher levels. And so, of course, these algorithms that you're learning, every time you do learn an algorithm, okay, take the derivative. Here's how you take the derivative of a polynomial. Here's how you take the derivative of the trigonometric functions, right? This is the integral of here's how you do a u substitution. Here's the product rule for the derivative, the quotient rule for the derivative. All of these algorithms, all of these things that you memorize, they have deep geometric meaning. There are non-trivial geometries at play here. If you think about the geometry behind all of these, even the calculus 1 and 2 definitions, the geometry there, one could spend years just thinking about and studying, okay? And so, yeah, I would say really attack and question and think deeply about theorems. Do not just memorize things. Make sure you understand what you're doing. It's better to think about one topic for a really long time than to try and read 80 pages of a textbook in one day, in one sitting. You're going to read 80 pages of a textbook and maybe you'll retain some information, but that information is going to be mostly memorized. It's not going to be information stemming from a deep intuition about a topic. Whereas if you spend an entire day just focusing on one idea or one theorem or one definition and really trying to understand what it means, you're going to gain a way deeper intuition, a way better ability to kind of work with these mathematical concepts. And of course, it'll take longer for you to make progress. And maybe this isn't the best way to make progress at the start of your mathematical education because, at some point when you're just starting off in math, you kind of do have to memorize things for a little while and jump through the hoops for a little while. But later on, and especially when you've made it far enough in math where you can, take a single day just to study a theorem for a full day just studying one theorem, I think that this is conducive to deeper learning. I think this is conducive to mathematical progress that cannot be achieved just by comprehending or just by, amassing a vast breadth of textbooks, right? It's not conducive to deep learning. Conducive to deep learning is not do you know this theorem and how to apply it to solve a problem, but do you understand the theorem? Do you understand the meaning of the theorem, the heart of the theorem, the heart and bones of the theorem? Do you understand the life behind the theorem? Have you interacted? Have you spoken with the theorem? Have you had a conversation with the theorem? Do you understand what it's saying about the world, what it's saying about the universe, right? And obviously it takes longer, but math is not a race. It takes time. You have to be patient. It takes years of patient study, consistent study. But those years become more and more fruitful because your study becomes more and more, it gains more and more depth It gains more and more, artistic and creative flavor. So the longer you study math, the more beautiful it becomes, the more powerful it becomes. I've had insights in math that are literally enlightening to the level of like spiritual enlightenment as far as I can reach as a human being, right? Like obviously I've had spiritual experiences, had religious experiences in my life that can't be compared and described by math, but some of the most religious, some of the most spiritual experiences in my life have been in mathematics through realizations of the deeper meanings of some of these mathematical statements and theorems. And it's completely transformative to me. It gives my life, invests my life with so much meaning. It is completely worth, your time and your effort. But it's not going to be easy. It takes consistency. It takes sacrifice. You have to have a reason. You have to have a reason why you want to keep studying, and keep studying math, even though it's not going to be fun 100% of the time. It's going to be grueling. It's going to be tough. If you love what you're doing, then a lot of that time will feel effortless. And trust me, you'll learn to love math more and more the more that you study it. So I think for right now, and I know this has been a long-winded kind of discussion, but I would say, this is a serious problem. Video games are seriously addictive. YouTube is seriously addictive. There's a ton of things in this world that are seriously addictive. We live in a capitalist system that has designed structures to target the human mind, to target the chemicals and the neurons of the human mind and manipulate them to gain profit. It's just the reality of the world that we're living in, okay? And because of that, there are a plethora of structures, including video games, that are extremely addictive, and that's no accident. That is not by accident. Social media, YouTube, various drugs and substances, but, technology is targeting the human mind, and technology is not a bad thing. It is a tool. We can interact with technology in a harmonious way, in a positive way, and have a healthy relationship with technology. However, there are companies, there are corporations, and softwares that are targeting the human mind, targeting your short-term desires, your short-term reward system, which is a primal biological system that has existed and evolved over a long, millennia and longer. And it's a very primitive chemical system that is very subject to manipulation and to being targeted. And so you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the fact that your brain is susceptible. Human brains are weak. We are just animals. We're biological creatures. Our minds are, very much crave dopamine. They crave certain, neuroreceptors, and they chase after that. And so you have to recognize your own biological weakness. We all have it. We all have our own biological weaknesses and shortcomings. But that doesn't need to be that doesn't need to stop you, right? That's just a weakness. It doesn't mean that you have to give into it. It's not going to be easy. But if you kind of train your brain, if you kind of try and retrain the neurons in your brain to form the habits that you want to have in your life, then you will be able to kind of be more successful and more consistent in math. And if you notice yourself falling into an addiction, maybe it's not the problem of the hobby, maybe it's not the problem of video games. In my case, maybe it's not that poker is inherently a bad activity, but it's rather that my current relationship with poker, my current relationship with video games or whatever is toxic, it's unhealthy, and I need to take some time, take some space, and I need to basically set weekly limits on myself, and not just limits, just be okay, I'm gonna only do this on Friday and Sunday, right? Or I'm only gonna do this on these specific days and this specific time. And if you cannot hold on, if you cannot keep that, if you cannot stick with that limitation that you've set for yourself, then, you're in trouble. I mean, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to stick to those limitations. I've certainly set limitations for myself and not been able to stick to them. I think that setting, smaller goals is better than setting larger goals. Maybe if I'm like super addicted, let's say I'm just super addicted to poker, or maybe video games. Let's just go with video games. Let's say that I'm just absolutely so addicted to video games that if I just tried to force myself to only play video games on Friday and Sunday, I couldn't do it. Like come Tuesday, I would be like playing video games, and I'm gonna fail that limitation. Well, then maybe that limitation is too strict at first. There's two kind of approaches you can take. You can either seek help, seek recovery. There's different recovery options out there. There's Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous type programs. I'm sure for video games and other various addictions, there are these blank X anonymous programs that can be helpful. There's various YouTube channels that might be helpful. But another possibility is if you can't do Friday and Sunday, then try to just restrict yourself to playing video games in the evening. And then, create a really light restriction that you can follow. Create a light enough restriction that you can follow, and then follow it. Like, once you create that light restriction, enforce it, because you can do it. So maybe your light restriction is like, okay, I'm only going to play video games in the evenings. And then in the mornings, I'm going to study. For the first 2 hours every morning, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to get my coffee, I'm going to get my breakfast, I'm going to go to the library and study for 2 hours at least, right? And then I'm only playing video games in the evening once the sun has set on the sky. Once the sun has dipped below the horizon, then I'm allowed to play video games. That's a pretty realistic and achievable limitation. I mean, you can still play video games for a long time, right? And every day at first, right? But enforce that limitation for, a month, let's say, for a month. And then once you enforce that limitation for like a month, then make it progressively more strict. Then maybe do it once every other day, right? After you've achieved that for a full month, then you can the next month you can be like, all right, let's go ahead and enforce once every other day. And it's a slow process of kind of slowly releasing the hold that this hobby, this activity has on your brain and on your neurotransmitters and on your neural connections, right? You have to slowly break that hold, that addiction, right? There are people that advocate cold turkey techniques, and there are certain, like I said, like Blank Anonymous, Video Games Anonymous, or Narcotics Anonymous, for example. These programs offer great advice. It is a very, end-all, be-all advice. It's very, you must quit at all costs. You must quit cold turkey. You'll never be able to have a healthy relationship with this substance to which you're addicted. I don't think that that's necessarily the truth. I think that there is a lot of truth to it, and it is very helpful, especially if you're in a state where you're like not able to function. You're so addicted to something that you're not able to function in society. Then I think that these programs like Narcotics Anonymous are really beneficial and really good. However, I believe that there's nuance to everything. Not any program is inherently true, and for an addiction, maybe it's possible for you to improve your relationship with this, with video games, and maybe it's going to take some time. Maybe you need to, every month create a lighter and lighter, or a stricter and stricter restriction, where you start out very light. You start with a very light restriction, but you make sure you enforce it. And then you kind of make it progressively more and more restrictive. Okay, and I really wish you well. I hope that, you end up, you follow your goals and you continue to learn math, and I truly wish you the best on your journey. This is a difficult question, and I cannot claim to be an expert. I mean, I think that this type of question is something that no human being can ever fully answer. And we're all very limited to our own biological processes, and addiction is a very complicated and nuanced disease and problem. Addiction is a very, very, and I'm not saying that you're addicted, I'm just saying in general, addiction, I've struggled with addiction in my life. I struggle with addiction in my life, and it's a very nuanced and difficult problem that, we don't have all the answers to. But at the end of the day, you have to keep fighting. You have to fight for yourself. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on who you are. And just keep fighting day in and day out. All right.